Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Vortex, where lies and falsehoods are trapped and exposed. I'm Michael Voris. Many patriots, Catholics, and others of goodwill are looking around the country and scratching their heads saying, how did the commies seize power here in the United States? Overcoming America did not happen in a day or even a couple of decades. It was, as the commies correctly note, the result of a long march through the institutions. It was a coordinated attack against foundational principles through the foundational institutions, with the destruction of the family as the goal. The family is the building block of any civilization, and without it, nothing else can long endure. So institutions that helped form family, support family, advance family, had to be eaten away at, chipped away at, slowly at first, but gradually picking up speed. There are many dynamics we can talk about here, the taking over of the media, education, the courts, and so forth. One we would like to concentrate on here in this episode is the invasion of Christian morality, first through Protestant denominations and eventually Catholicism. The Christian faith had served as a kind of moral cement since the nation's founding, keeping passions relatively in check and allowing for the family to flourish, at least relative to the miserable situation family life finds itself in today. At the heart of the attack against Christianity was the eugenist movement of the late 19th century and the early 20th century. As today, the rich global-minded elites wanted to control the world and limit population growth among the peasant classes, seen as undesirable. The central group going after the family was, oddly enough, the family of the Rockefellers, longtime believers in controlling the world population. With their billions, they funded the burgeoning birth control movement spearheaded by Maria Stopes in the UK and Margaret Sanger here in the US. Both women, but especially Sanger, were massive racists, so much in fact that the woke culture finally caught up to Planned Parenthood, forcing them to rename their highest award, dropping the name of Sanger from it. The movement targeted Christianity in general, but specifically the Church of England, the Anglicans, to get them to accept birth control as moral. Their first two attempts failed in 1910 and then again in 1920. But in 1930, at the Lambeth Conference, Anglican leaders finally caved in and declared that contraception in some limited form, of course, was moral and could be permitted. This marked the first time in 2,000 years that any Christian group had accepted the moral evil of contraception. Even, notably here, Martin Luther had virulently condemned birth control. This provoked an almost immediate response from the Vatican, declaring that Christian morality has held from the very beginnings that birth control is always a grave evil, an intrinsic evil. The only Christian faith which still teaches this truth now. One by one, Protestant congregations gave in and accepted birth control as compatible with the teachings of Christ, which it is not. This was a major victory for the Marxists. The Christian faith, which held society together, had now been dramatically weakened, especially since America was a predominantly Protestant nation. It was not long, with religious principles weakened, that other institutions began to become unsettled. Various mainline Protestant denominations across the board began to become unmoored from Scripture, and since many of them ran or were strongly aligned with the nation's most prestigious colleges, they too began their great leftward lurch. Those universities produced the next generation and the next generation and the next generation of cultural and political leaders who, having been formed in an anti-religious environment, began dismantling morality up and down the country. They got into law schools and made their way onto the courts, and in the late 1960s made contraception a constitutional right based on a manufactured right to privacy, which then went on to become the basis for wholesale abortion and eventually homosexual marriage. In the midst of all of this, however, there was still that Catholic opposition to contraception. And Church Militant covered all of this in one of our investigations we produced over 10 years ago, which we called Contraception Deception.
Let's zoom out and look at what's going on here for a minute. John Rockefeller III and Planned Parenthood are meeting at Notre Dame to promote birth control among Catholics. Noonan is teaching at Notre Dame during this same period, but at the same time, he's invited to give a 2-hour presentation to kick off the first meeting of Pope Paul's Commission on Population, Family, and Birth Rate in Rome. Father Hesburgh then not only invited the wolf into his own fold to ravage the sheep at will, but sent the wolf's emissaries into the very heart of the church. At the close of the secret conferences, the attending theologians signed a document stating they no longer believed Catholics were obligated to follow the Church's teaching on contraception.
The major force behind attacking the Catholic Church and trying to subvert her was Saul Alinsky, who wormed his way into influential church circles over the issue of social justice, creating, in essence, class warfare. That was the topic of another investigation we did years ago as well.
LACAN. That group, coalition, asked the Bishops' Conference to defund that group, and they said, no, that group is pro-abortion and pro-same-sex marriage. It's right on their website. It's on the website. Welcome to 2010. Nothing's hidden anymore. Young Workers United, Preble Street, Voces de la Frontera, hope I didn't mess that up, Chicago Workers Collaborative, Southwest Organizing Project, all of these groups have some connection. They fund groups, they fund money, they shuffle money, they're allied with other groups that are all opposed to Catholic Church teaching. The San Francisco Organizing Project. That was asked again, please defund that group. They've supported voter initiatives and voter drives to advance health care legislation in the areas of reproductive rights, which we all know is code language for abortion. Provide it, make sure it's in health insurance coverage. This group gets Catholic money through the Catholic Campaign for Human Development. Even after requests and pointing it out and saying, here, change this, nothing's happened. They're still getting money.
As things turned more Marxist in the U.S., as well as the Church, it became clear that communism was ascendant, especially with the silence of duplicitous bishops who were busy covering up their own sins of child rape of thousands of altar boys by homosexual priests and bishops. These men sat silent as the political winds were shifting furiously and offered next to no aid at all, allowing their flocks to be overrun and then ground up in the machinery of the culture of death, as lay Catholics by the tens of millions succumbed to the propaganda of the Marxist Democrats, demonstrated by the overwhelming support they showed for the child killer in chief, Obama. Obama was able to actually put together a coalition of so-called Catholics who aggressively campaigned for him and who attacked faithful Catholics as racists for opposing his anti-Catholic policies.
This is one of the suspected reasons why people like Nancy Pelosi and John Kerry and Ted Kennedy, when he was alive, just used to be able to waltz on up to Holy Communion and no one ever said anything to them. They got to be coddled and ignored and, oh, well, we can't do that. And it's their decision whether they receive Holy Communion or not. No, it's not. Canon 915, but we'll get into that later. Perceptions like this are heightened when the bishops publish a document about how Catholics should vote. So in 2003, during the run-up to the Bush-Kerry campaign, the USCCB produced a controversial document entitled Faithful Citizenship. Sounds very theological, doesn't it? A Catholic Call to Political Responsibility. It was controversial more because of what it did not say than what it did say. It left the door open, many say intentionally, to allow Catholics to vote for either party, despite the support of intrinsic evils by one party, such as abortion and so-called same-sex marriage by the Democrats.
Now, if you haven't heard all of this before, or maybe only little bits and pieces of it, well, that's what Church Militant is here for, to help you connect the dots and understand the war we are in right now, theologically as well as politically. This is all just a small sample of the wisdom of the Church that you're going to find here on Church Militant as a premium member. The world is in its current condition because of the lack of conviction of Catholics, as well as the ignorance of men of goodwill who've never encountered the fullness of Christ in his Catholic Church. So please sign up today and become a premium member here at Church Militant. Channel that justified anger you have at the current political and cultural scene in shoring up your own spirituality as well as your theological knowledge. Church Militant Premium, it's only $10 a month. And it not only goes to the premium work we do here, but it also helps defray the cost of every other program that you get for free, like this Vortex, for example. Vortex and other things here at Church Militant are free to you, but they aren't free for us to produce. We have thousands of episodes of our premium programming, and we're hoping you sign up and watch them. And of course, if you're already a member, then watch them again in light of our new world that we find ourselves in currently. There's a great cultural war raging, and at its heart, it is a spiritual war. The war for souls that began in Eden and exists until the very last day in every single man's heart. And no man can win that war without being grounded in truth as a first priority. So please sign up today and help us help you while you help us evangelize the world. God love you. I'm Michael Voris.